But thank you all so much for joining us for another edition of Author Hour in Massachusetts. Tonight, we're featuring best-selling author Matt Goldman and Lori Roy, who will discuss their new thrillers, The Murder Show and The Final Episode. A little bit about Matt. Matt is the New York Times best-selling author. He's also a playwright and an Emmy Award-winning television writer for Seinfeld, for Ellen, and for several other shows. He has been nominated for the Shamus and Nero Awards and was a Lariat adult fiction reading list selection. He lives in Minnesota with his wife, pets, and whichever children happen to be around. And a little bit about Lori. Lori's debut novel, Bent Road, was awarded the Edgar Allan Poe Award for Best First Novel by an American author. Her work has been twice named a New York Times notable crime book and has been included on various best of and summer reading lists. Until She Comes Home was a New York Times editor's choice and a finalist for the Edgar Allan Poe Award. Let Me Die in His Footsteps was included among the top fiction books of 2015 and was named one of the best 15 mystery novels of 2015 by Oline Cogdill. The novel also received the Edgar Allan Poe Award for Best Novel, making Lori the first woman to receive an Edgar Award for both Best First Novel and Best Novel. And she's the third person in history to have done so. And Lori lives with her family in West Central Florida. So let's give a big virtual round of applause to Matt and Lori for joining us here tonight. Matt, Lori, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Robert.
Absolutely. So, Matt, your book, The Murder Show, came out a few months ago. And Lori, your book, The Final Episode, actually comes out next week. Lots of similarities between both books. But before we delve into them, was wondering if you could both give a brief, say, 60-second synopsis of what your book is about. And Matt, we'll start with you.
All right, my book is about a guy named Ethan Harris who created a television show called The Murder Show. And it's been on for 3 years. It gets worse ratings every year. He pitches the 4th season to the network. They say, this stinks, come back with something better. And he's kind of in panic mode because he's 40 years old, which isn't old in real life, but it is in Hollywood. And so he goes back to the drawing board, and the Writers Guild strike happens, the one we just went through in the last couple of years. So now he has a little more time. So he goes back to Minnesota, where he's from, and he runs into some high school friends. And one of them is named Ro Greeman, who's a Minneapolis police officer now. And they shared a tragic incident after graduating high school the summer after. They were on a trip to a cabin. The car broke down. Their friend Ricky walked for help and never came back. They found him the next day. It was a hit and run. To this day, it hasn't been solved. Ro now believes that there might have been some real foul play involved. It's well out of her jurisdiction as a Minneapolis police officer, and she asks Ethan to help investigate under the guise like, hey, you could use this for your show. You could learn something and it'll be a new season for your TV show. He doesn't really believe her, but he's interested in her. They're still both single at 40 years old. And so they start investigating together. And the more they find, the darker and kind of twistier it gets. It's really about a writer of a TV crime drama who gets in over his head in a real murder investigation.
Yeah. Great, Matt. Thanks for sharing. Great synopsis. Lori, would you like to tell us a little bit about your book?
Well, that was really interesting, and I'm kind of wanting to talk to Matt about the whole TV background because we have a little bit of that in common. So this is a very hard thing to do for a writer to summarize his or her book. I'll tell you that right up front. So Jenny Jones, my protagonist, she is 11 years old when a local girl disappears and Jenny's father goes to prison. 20 years in the future, 20 years later in the present, that story, that tragic summer of Jenny's that almost ruined her life is now the subject of the country's #1 streaming true crime series. It's the show everybody is watching because everybody remembers the little girl who disappeared 20 years earlier. And this show is wildly popular because by its final episode, it promises and always delivers on solving the unsolvable. So as Jenny is watching the episodes play out week after week, she begins to become increasingly worried and then certain that somebody from that long ago tragic summer has come back home and is looking for revenge. And as the final episode draws near, she becomes increasingly concerned and frightened that what the final episode is going to mean when the truth comes out for her and for her father. That's it in a nutshell.
Amazing, Lori. Amazing. So I should tell the audience, because I did not mention this after we went live, I've listened to and or read both of these books within the past 5 days and really enjoyed them. So they have my personal stamp of approval for whatever that's worth. So let's jump into some additional questions here. So a lot of similarities between your two books. One of them is using the sort of entertainment industry as a backdrop. So in The Murder Show, we have The Murder Show, which is the name of the crime series that the protagonist works on as the showrunner. And then in the final episode, you just referenced the #1 streaming true crime show. I think it was called Inspired by True Events. So yes. Could you tell us a little bit more about your fictionalized TV shows? And are they influenced by any real true crime TV shows out there?
Matt, would you like to go ahead?
I think it's not influenced by any real life show, but maybe every TV crime drama. Mine is about the fake show, which we never see and we only hear a little bit about.
Right.
Is about a ex Minneapolis police officer who's become a private detective, and she solves the cases that she's brought back into the department whenever there's a case they have a hard time solving. So I didn't consciously base that on anything, but now that I say it out loud, it's kind of like Monk, although this show is not a light drama, it's a darker drama. And so but the dynamics of the entertainment industry is based on my 30 plus years of working as a television writer and producer in LA. And the forces that are at play, the fickle network executives and how things are hot and cold overnight. And that's all based on my real experience.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, Matt. I wanted to know how much of your protagonist character is based on you. I don't know if you have, if your parents are like the parents you portray in the book. And, you had some funny commentary about the TV industry, how if you don't have your own show by a certain age, you're considered a failure. And, I think you were talking about the importance of having a strong third or fourth season of a show.
Yeah.
How much of your character is based on you?
That part of it is all quite based on me.
Yeah.
And for television writers, to me, it always felt like I was being worked to death, working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, or I was desperate to find my next job. And it's really an unpleasant state of existence. I had a wonderful career. I worked on some great shows. I worked a lot. I worked my Writers Guild dues, I worked steadily for 120 quarters, which is 30 years. I had a very nice career out there, but it still felt like my existence was day to day. It wasn't, but it felt like it was. And that anxiety and that insecurity, Ethan has all of that.
Excellent. I have more questions about Julia Louis-Dreyfus, but we're going to move on to Lori.
All right.
We'll circle back to all those. So Lori, let us know a little bit about your fictionalized TV series and if it's influenced by any real life ones.
Well, I like Matt's line about influenced by all of them. I researched both TV shows and I did some reading that were true crime. The Bob, is it Bob Hurst? The Jinx, or John Hurst? I can't remember now. I studied that quite a bit, and I researched a lot because one of the things that really fascinated me, and that show was a good example, was when these, particularly the documentary style shows, mine is more of a docu series, like a docudrama, like the Menendez show on Netflix. It's more in that vein. But when the documentary type, what is their responsibility legally and morally, ethically, if they uncover evidence in their research that would actually affect or possibly affect whether or not someone was charged, or if someone was perhaps exonerated or so forth. And in the Jinx, they had a couple of odd, unique things happen. So I did a lot of digging and researching and trying to watch a lot of interviews of I guess they would have been producers, is that the right term? That how they made decisions when they found evidence. When did they turn it over? How soon did they turn it over? Did they take into account the launching of the show and the timing of the episodes and things like that? But that wasn't always real evident. So all that to say, those were the kinds of things I researched. And then on sort of a less, I guess, technical point, the thing that really got me thinking about this was, it was a show, I think it's called Candy, and it's been done a couple of times, about a woman down in Texas in the 80s who murders a friend and kills her with an axe. And then this woman, there's a trial, and so this is a real crime, took place in the 80s. She was a young mother at the time. And as I went, of course, once you watch those shows, you run over and you research everybody in them. Well, many of the people that were part of that real life incident were still living. And one of them was last known to be living just about an hour from me. And that was so close to home. I just was thinking a lot about what must it be like to watch your life unfold on TV, and particularly a tragic moment in your life. So all of that went into my fictional, inspired by true events show.
So here in Massachusetts, just hours ago, Karen Reed, I don't know if you've been following the Karen Reed case, okay? But the jury just reached a verdict a few hours ago. She was found not guilty. Now there's going to be, and there's already started to be, lots of docu-series and Dateline and 2020 and 48-hour type episodes. And then there's content creators online, whether it be YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, and people are really, really interested in this case. And but it gets me to my next question. What are your thoughts on people profiting off of true crime, people exploiting and monetizing, real tragedies? Because I think that's something the true crime entertainment industry does. And, it's something that perhaps, certainly in your book, Lori, and I know, Matt, in your book, the TV show is fiction. It's a fictionalized, but it's based on, true crime incidents. So Lori and Matt, any thoughts on the greater, true crime entertainment industry, where you have, whether it's a small individual content creator in their basement, or a huge mega Hollywood movie studio profiting off of people's real life trauma and I'll stop. I'll keep babbling. But so Lori or Matt, yeah, hopefully you know what I'm trying to say. What are your thoughts?
Lori, do you want to go first?
Yeah. You go ahead and take this one first.
All right. It takes two for them to profit, and the second one is the public. And I lived in Los Angeles during the OJ trial, and so now there's all these true crime shows and true crime podcasts. But in the olden days, it was just newspapers and then TV news and radio news. People are fascinated by it. So it only someone's going to profit off of it. Uh, and I personally have an aversion to that kind of sensationalized uh, selling of tragedy, but a lot of people like it. I mean, if you're driving on the freeway and there's a big slowdown because there's an accident on the other side of the freeway, but still your lane is slowing down to take a look, that's that's the part of human nature that makes that such a profitable enterprise. I don't know if it's avoidable. So it only takes one person to put it out there, and a lot of people are going to be curious.
Lori?
Yeah, I yes, on all fronts to that. Um, yeah, one of the things that I thought quite a bit about, though my show is fictional and no one's making money in my show because it doesn't exist. But I wanted the producers, the show to be responsible and ethical. So I had to think about things like if they were uncovering new facts and information, they needed to share that with law enforcement that would in turn be responsible for acting or not. All that to say, when these shows are done, especially like the docuseries type where they're dramatized, I guess docudrama, where they're dramatized, the Menendez show on Netflix is a good example. When people see it, even when there's the disclaimer, some events and people have been dramatized, but when people see it, they believe it. It's in their minds that this is how it happened, and they start making judgments and decisions. Not that our judgments and decisions make any difference, in the court of law, but so that I think more about that because they are going to happen. To Matt's point, they're coming, and but I think that there is a huge responsibility that goes with them. So I'll stop with that. So I could go on for a while on
I
that
do
subject.
know from my years in television, based on actual events was a huge selling point.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite things that ever happened, and the Coen brothers, who happen to go to my high school, but they're older than me, but I still like to brag about that. Uh, for Fargo, they said based on actual events,
Yeah,
and it wasn't. They just said it, which
it's
is one of my
brilliant.
favorite things ever. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
before we move on to the next big similarity, I am going to break my own rules and ask an audience question. Leanne has a question for Matt. All of your novels have been excellent, but will we ever revisit with Niels Shapiro again? I need more. I need some more Niels. And what I will say, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, Matt, is
Nils.
Niels.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Hopefully,
Nils. I
Nils.
pronounce it Nils. Some people pronounce it Niles, but I pronounce it Nils. Yes.
So Matt, hopefully this isn't a spoiler, but I'll just say that Niels does make a cameo, I believe. Is that right?
He's in 3 chapters of the murder show. And Nils is going to be back in his own book December 2nd. It publishes. It's called Dark Humor.
Oh,
And for the people who want to read that book, it is a standalone book. You don't have to read the other Nils books. You don't have to read the murder show. But if you read that book, it's called Dark Humor. It will spoil the murder show. It's almost like a part two to the murder show. But that book will be out, and there will be another Nils book for sure in 2026.
well,
Yeah, so
at the
at
end of this
least two
interview,
more are coming. Yeah.
at the end of the interview, Matt, I'm going to ask you what you're working on, and you can reiterate that.
Okay.
But I think it was
Yeah.
really clever that you included that character, and maybe you've hooked some people to read.
It does set up his return. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I thought that. Okay, so next question for both of you, and we'll start with Lori for this one. Both your books deal with cold cases. I think both of them are 20 or maybe 22 years. The unsolved crimes are like 20 to 22 years old, and they deal with a lot of childhood trauma, childhood guilt. So one of my questions would be, so the books deal with trauma. Were there moments when you were writing the books, were there moments that hit harder for you to write, and how did you navigate them when you were writing about these other characters' traumas? Lori, what are your thoughts there?
So the thing that I really enjoy writing when I am writing from a child's point of view is that children have such clarity, which is to say they're not jaded yet. They, for the most part, they don't generally come at life with a big agenda. So they're very authentic narrators, and I enjoy that, and I find it easier to get into that, I don't know, mindset, that point of view. I keep using the word point of view. They're honest. If they're hurting, they tell you. If they're happy, they tell you. If they're scared, they tell you. I don't think I found anything difficult in that. I find adults more difficult to write, and I find the as I say this, maybe I'm revealing things about myself. I'm not quite sure, but the better a character is, the nicer they are, the harder I find to write them. You know, maybe they're just not that interesting. I don't know. But the bad guys, I wrote my last book. I wrote a mafia boss in 1950s Ybor City. I was scared to death to try that, and I slipped right into it. Had no problem. So yeah, I enjoy writing a child's point of view.
And Matt, in your book, the protagonist was a little older. I think they were just out of high school
Yes.
when their incident happened. But did you have any difficulty relaying the trauma to the readers? And did you experience any trauma or grief that was triggered by you writing all this?
Well, I did lose one friend in high school and another in college. And I think, I mean, it's tragic when you lose anyone anytime. But when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you think you're invincible. You think you're going to live forever. And so it has an extra level of shock to it. Um, and and for Ro and Ethan, who were on this road trip with their friend Ricky, and when the car broke down, he's the one who went to walk for help. So they do have a sense of guilt that really lingers with them. That is heightened by that we're invincible, we're going to live forever attitude when you're that age. So I tried to tap into that when I wrote the book.
So both of your characters, your protagonists, have I guess what I would call father issues, daddy issues. I think Lori's obviously that's a really significant portion of your book. And Matt, in your book, I find the relationship between the father and son kind of funny. So Matt, why don't you talk a little bit about the daddy issues, and then we'll pivot to Lori. But again, there's so many similarities with these books. We're gonna get through at least a
Yeah.
couple more. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Matt.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then now I hear Lori has a historical coming out. I also have a historical coming out next year. But anyway, yeah, I just wrote. It's always fun to write parents because everyone thinks their parents are a little nutty, and so uh, there's all sorts of different specifics based on ethnicity and location and things, but it all kind of boils down to the same thing. That's why the parents in Seinfeld were funny, and the parents in Everybody Loves Raymond were funny, and uh, I have Ethan who's supposedly home for the Jewish high holidays, and he keeps making excuses to not go to any services. And his parents find a way to put a positive spin on that. And that was a lot of fun to write. Um, because he said he was working on his show idea when he was really investigating a real life murder. Um, and and I'm sure if my kids wrote a book or a TV show, I would look hilarious. It is kind of a universal thing that people look at their parents with a certain amount of I love them, but they're a little out of their minds, and so that was the most fun thing to write in that book.
Yeah, and I liked how proud the parents and the father was in particular at the
Yeah,
towards the end of the book. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
good stuff there. Now, Laurie, on the other end of things, though, you want to talk about the relationship between your protagonist and her father.
Yeah, I'm going to be careful what I
Yep,
share so I don't tip any secrets.
yep.
So, as I mentioned, Jenny, the protagonist, when she was 11, a little girl, local girl disappears, and then her father ends up in prison. So, 20 years later, he's still in prison. And I've always kind of been fascinated, probably far too much, so with families that end up finding out someone amongst them was a criminal. Whether it's the serial killer dad or the con man, or um, how does somebody deal with that? So that's what she's dealing with. She's tried 20 years. She's been trying to live her life in the same town where all this happened, and I think understandably, people have thought all this time maybe she knows more than she's letting on. She knows more about what her father did. She knows more about the little girl who's never been found. So she's faced a lot of hatred that's come her way. And then she has her feelings about her father. On one hand, she feels she knows he's guilty, but there's this nagging part of her that just thinks, but what if he isn't? And then there's a lot of stress when you have those two feelings rubbing up against each other all your life. So to compensate for all that, she's a closet organizer, and she's insanely organized and compulsive about everything in its place because she's always trying to put her life back together through putting, things back together. So yeah, the father relationship does carry through the novel and Jenny's present day point of view.
And Laurie, something I really enjoyed about your book was the way you told the story. So it was dual timeline, it was past and present. But also, can you talk about the two very different storytelling devices you used to differentiate between the two parallel storylines?
Yeah. Yeah, so just real briefly, I talked about the backstory. Little girl disappears, father goes to prison. That is the subject of the fictional, inspired by true events, true crime show. That's the story that they're retelling, and by the final episode, they will solve this crime that's gone unsolved for 20 years. So the book begins with episode 1 instead of chapter 1. Interior Pharaoh household night, or actually pre-dawn. And then it's just the backstory. It's narrative. It's not a screenplay or anything. But so you get what happened in episode 1. And then you jump forward to the present where we have Jenny narrating her life as we are, I think, 7 days from the final episode airing. And things begin to unfold like that. Someone from long ago returns and is a threat. And then, so we have front story, and then we have episode 2 and episode 3, and those march through the book until the final episode, and then the culmination of everything.
So I wanted to ask you both about the settings that you decided to write these books in. So Southern Gothic, which is one of those things I hear about all the time, but I never quite understood. But I looked it up, Laurie. I think I've educated myself. But can you talk about your setting, the Florida swamplands, okay? And I feel like that swamp was like its own character, and we kept kind of revisiting it. And then Matt, is it a coincidence that Matt, you grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I believe anyway, and your book is set primarily in Minneapolis, and then can you talk about how a lot of these crimes were happening like in the woods when the car would break down? Like, I can totally picture the swamps. Lori, you did a great job describing that. And Matt, you with the flashbacks and they stayed in the truck and he went to get help or whatever. And so I could really I felt like I was there the way you were describing the scenes, those two scenes in particular. But Lori, can you talk about your setting for us?
Okay, so the book is set in the Big Cypress Swamp. That's about an hour south of where, or a couple hours south of where I live in Florida. So there's lots of obvious reasons why a swamp is a great setting for a crime novel. The danger, the gators, the snakes, the water. Swamp's a great place to hide a body. I did a lot of research. I traipsed around the swamp. One of my sons came with me and kept saying, "Mom, do we have to keep going? Because I'm seeing gator slides in the banks." And we did have one terrifying encounter with a gator. It wasn't really that terrifying, but it's the most frightened I've ever been. So yeah, but then the thing that really resonated with me was the fragility of the swamp. It's 1.5 million or 15 million acres or 1.5 million. I can't remember. I should have checked. I mean, it's a massive place. It's part of the Everglades. It's been around for, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of years. And yet it's very, very fragile. And that is sort of, I guess, brought to life through the ghost orchid, which plays a part in the book. It's on the cover of the book, in fact. So that's just kind of a brief, why the swamp.
Yeah. And Matt, why Minnesota? Why the woods?
I grew up in Minnesota. I spent a lot of time traveling to what we here call up north, whether it's northern Minnesota or northern Wisconsin. I know on the East Coast they're called cottages more. Here they're called cabins. Uh, Almost everyone has a cabin. My family had a cabin at one point, and it is really how people live here, where they live and work in the city. They spend a lot of their summers up at the lake. And those trips, there's that age when you get your driver's license and you're 16 or 17 years old, and now you can go to the cabin by yourself without your parents, and all of a sudden you feel like an adult because you're going to the grocery store and cooking for yourself and making your own decisions, and no one's really keeping an eye on you. And that's all very much the part of the culture of the Upper Midwest. And I wanted to capture that with this book. It was a big part of my growing up. It was a huge deal to me when I was got my driver's license and my parents allowed me to go up to the cabin with some friends by myself. And it really felt like a grown-up thing. And so I have these characters who have that feeling, and then, the worst thing imaginable happens. One of them gets killed. So there's a real push-pull with the attraction of wanting to grow up fast and then the consequences of what can happen when you do that.
In the chat, Leanne writes, both of you are masterful builders of atmosphere as both an extension of character and plot, and you really create very indelible characters. You are both must-reads for me. How about that? So we will take, I'm going to talk for 10 more minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience. But Matt and Lori, can you talk about how you go about writing your story? I think the question I'm legally obligated to ask you is, are you a plotter or are you a pantser? And in preparation for this interview, I did read previous interviews that you've both done, and I think I know the answers to these. But Matt, why don't you go first? Are you a plotter or are you a pantser?
I am a pantser, a
Yes.
dedicated pantser, and I'll tell you the reason why. I worked on over 500 episodes of television. I wasn't the writer that says written by, but I was one of the writers in the room who took it from a one-line idea to a what we used to call a one page to an outline to a script. And a lot of attention was paid to outlines. Um, the writers spent a lot of time breaking a story. A writer would go off and write an outline based on all that work that was done. The writers would rewrite it and get it to where we all thought it was great, and we'd send it to the studio, and the studio would say, "This stinks." And then we'd have to rewrite it, and we'd get it to the place where the studio and the writers thought it was great, and then we'd send it to the network, and they'd say, "This stinks." And so we'd rewrite it again to now all these supposedly smart people thought, "This is a great outline." And then the writer would go away and write a script faithful to that outline, and almost invariably it would absolutely be the worst thing ever. And I think the reason for that is the part of our brain we use to write an outline is a very left brain logical thing. It's kind of like making a shopping list. This happens, this happens, this happens. It all makes sense. But if you create three-dimensional characters who feel and behave like real people, who behave consistently, they don't necessarily fit into that outline. And so I'm not able to take all those things into consideration when I write an outline. I need the characters up on their feet and interacting with each other and behaving consistently to figure out what the story is. So I'm a as of now through several, well, at least 13 books, a dedicated pantser. Yeah.
Now, Lori, I may have misinformation, but I think you might be more of a plotter. So what about you, Lori? Plotter or pantser?
I'm my office is a whirlwind pantser for the first probably 2/3 of the book. And but I have studied the principles of screenwriting, like different like the structure of story. I'm able to that didn't come naturally to me. So I lean on that's the ideas of like the inciting incident and you know, the third act twist and things like that. But once I get maybe about 2/3 of a book done, I go back after the fact and outline it, sort of like do a chart. Chapter 1, I try to my days and time and stuff like that is always a mess. So I try to I started out as a tax accountant. So I'm always looking to get a good spreadsheet.
Hmm.
And that's what I'll do. I'll take that chaos and put it in a spreadsheet, and then that helps me get my arms around it. And then that final act is pretty easy to, I don't say easy, but it's inevitable what's going to happen by that point.
And I also want to ask you both about your origin stories. You know, how did you get started in writing? And I know that I think, Lori, you may have done more historical fiction at first, but you can correct me on that. And Matt, you've obviously started, I'm assuming you started in TV. So
Mhm.
Lori, why don't you start? Let us know sort of how you got involved in writing in the first place.
So, as I mentioned, I was a tax accountant, public accounting, and then I worked at Hallmark Cards in Kansas City. I decided when my oldest son was still very young, we moved to Florida, and I was able to, I was fortunate enough at the time that I had a choice, and I was able to choose to stay home with him, but I wanted to be developing a career for myself with those years and that time And so that's when I started writing. And I wrote for, I'm kind of that 10-year, 10,000 hours person. I worked at it for about 8.5 years in. I started writing what would become my first novel, Bent Road. And so I've been crime fiction the whole time, but several of my books are set in the past, the 50s, 60s, 30s, so several, a couple are contemporaries, several are set in the past. Most are set in the South. First, a couple of the first ones were, because I'm from Kansas. So yeah, that was my first book. Came out in 2011, and my seventh comes out, or my eighth, no, my seventh comes out. I'm not sure, whatever it is.
Good for you. That's a good problem to have.
It comes out in a few days.
Yeah, that's a good sign of success when you can't remember how many books you've published. But that's great. And so you were saying, so your first book, it took you roughly 8 years to publish. Is that what you had said?
No, it took me about 1.5 years to write it.
Okay.
I've been working on I wrote bad stuff for about 8.5 years.
Oh, I see. Okay, sure.
And then I started what would become, and then I ultimately sold it quickly, but after 10 years of work.
Now, Matt, is it common for a TV writer to transition to books? Tell us a little bit about your story.
It's been done before. I mean, I have a kind of weird entrance into writing. I was in college thinking I was going to go to medical school. I was a chemistry major. At the end of my junior year, some friends had invited me to see stand-up comedy live at a comedy club. I'd always liked stand-up comedy. I watched The Tonight Show all the time. I'd never seen it live, and when I saw it live, for some reason that I cannot explain to this day, I thought, oh, I should do that. So I started doing stand-up, and it was a huge turn for me. Um, Being on stage, I was terrified. I love the writing part. They would often have me open for national acts, people like Jerry Seinfeld and Roseanne Barr and Bob Saget and Dana Carvey. And when I got off stage, they would all say, good writing, which, I can take a hint. Um, but they gave me a lot of encouragement to like, you should go to LA and write, you would work. And so I was a 24-year-old boy at that time who didn't think things through very carefully. And I just went out there. I didn't know it was hard. I didn't know what the odds were, but it worked out. And the more I kind of came in as a joke guy, but the more I learned about character, the more I learned about story, um, the more I really just embraced writing. And I had always been a huge reader. Books were always my favorite thing. So it took me a long time to write my first to to make the effort, but I had this 4-month window between television shows, which is rare, where you leave a show and you're going to have a job in 4 months. And I sat down and I wrote my first book, and it changed my life. I'm very happy in the book world. It is a kinder, smarter place. Yeah.
Excellent. Sharon, I do see your questions in the chat, and I already plan on asking those at the end, so don't worry about that. If anyone has any questions or comments, though, now's the time. Please get them into the chat, get them into the Q&A. So we have a writing group here in Tewksbury, and I imagine many libraries and communities have writing groups. Wondering if either of you have any general writing advice for folks, particularly those who are interested in writing mysteries or thrillers or suspense. Any general advice you would give to a first time or aspiring author? Lori, why don't you go first for that one?
My favorite piece of advice, and it's one that I got very, very early on, is write the book you want to read. And that's very different than write the book you want to write. The book we want to write is the one that lets us do all the things we're good at and ignore all the things that maybe we need to work on. So yeah, think about what you love to read and then work on the craft until you can do the plot, do the characters, and create the setting, and get great writing partners who want to work as hard as you do, and read each other's work, critique each other's work. Those are kind of my favorites.
Great. And Matt?
I will tell you my advice, and I will tell you the best advice I ever received, which are two different things. My advice is be kind to yourself. It's hard, especially if you're starting out, and and know that most people's first drafts stink. Probably your favorite author's first draft stunk, and so if you just kind of work at it every day, sometimes you don't even have to know where it's going, and that's okay. If you if you go back and read what you wrote over the past 3 weeks or 4 weeks, it'll show you what it is and where it could go. And so just don't beat yourself up if you have a bad day, if it's hard. Um, that kind of never goes away, by the way, no matter how experienced you get. And the best piece of advice I ever received, and I was lucky to get it when I was 21 years old and just starting as a stand-up, was that just know you'll always have another idea. And that has freed me up so much because you can get myopic about what you think a story has to be or what you think a character has to be, and give yourself the freedom to think, well, maybe I can change it, maybe it can be different, and that can just that kind of freedom to fail and rewrite can can really help you move forward.
Excellent. Excellent answers. Um,
Advice.
And so we just gave advice to writers. How about we give some advice to readers? And do any of you have any book recommendation or author recommendations, whether they're read-alikes to your own works or something completely different? And I'm sure you've both been busy writing, but hopefully you've had a chance to read recently. So does anyone have any book recommendations for the audience? What are you reading currently that you would recommend? And Matt, we'll start with you.
Well, over the pandemic, I started reading John Le Carre for the very first time. I highly recommend those books. They're the perfect blend of genre and literary work for me, anyway. There's another British author who I discovered in the last 10 years, even though she's been around for a long time, is Kate Atkinson. I'm a huge fan of Kate Atkinson. Um, and I also want to give a shout out for one of my local fellow Minnesota authors named William Kent Kruger. His books just, he writes some standalones and he has a long running series, and they're just very well written and written with a lot of heart. I'm a I'm a big fan.
And Lori, do you have any recommendations for the audience?
Um, right now I'm just doing a lot of research, particularly when I'm in the early stages of a book. I don't tend to read a lot of fiction because I'm just so tired by the end of the day of, of just my own work. I
That's
have
okay.
trouble picking up a book. Um, I've been reading a lot of Robert Dugoni.
Okay.
The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell, I think, um, is one of my all-time favorites. Kent Kruger's work is beautiful. Um, those are a couple off the top of my head.
So we actually just hosted Robert a few months ago. He had collaborated for a book called Hold Strong, which is a little bit different than what he normally writes, but excellent book. Highly recommend that one in particular. All right, so we've got about 5 minutes or so. We're going to start to wind things down. I did want to ask, and it sounds like the answer is yes to this, but anyone thinking about branching out and writing in a genre besides mystery, thriller, suspense? Sounds like you both have historical fiction coming up, or maybe I misunderstood that. But Matt, any thoughts about branching out a bit?
Yes, I think about it all the time. I think about uh, I don't even want to use the word literary fiction, but just books that aren't crime fiction. I think about doing that. I have written a historical fiction book, and it is being published next year. It's called The Prohibited. There's a little bit of crime in it, but not a whole lot. Um, and and so that'll be out next year. But uh, I worked in TV for so long, and my first book came out 10 years ago, and I feel like I'm like frantically trying to catch up and make up for lost time. So I hope that I will be able to write in other genres, and um, my idea tarmac is full. So yeah,
So Matt, what would you think of this career arc? Okay, you start
yeah,
as a TV writer, and then you
yeah.
transition to books, and then you write a book. You write maybe a series that's so popular that it becomes a TV series. Okay, could you see that? Would that close the circle? Would that? What do you think?
That would be wonderful. But the reason I would love that to happen is not so I could go work on the TV show, but I would sell more books. And
Okay,
if I
good deal.
sell more books, I get to write more books. And I've had the thrill, and I was lucky to see my name on TV for a long time from when I was quite young. And now nothing gives me greater pleasure than seeing my book in a bookstore or in a library, uh, to know that someone's passing it around, to friends and family. But it would be nice to see one of the books be adapted to television.
Excellent. And Lori, let me just restate something I said in your bio that I think I kind of butchered. But so Lori's debut novel was awarded the Edgar Allan Poe Award for Best First Novel by an American Author. And then just a few years later, she went on to receive the Edgar Allan Poe Award for Best Overall Novel. So that made her the first woman in history to receive the Edgar Award for both Best Fiction Novel and Best Novel. And that's only been done twice before in history. And I feel like I glossed over that at the beginning, Lori. So that's a pretty big deal.
I
Okay.
just want to say that's hugely impressive. Yeah.
Yes, I should have led with that. So
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't do that justice at the beginning. But Lori, tell us a little bit about your historical fiction, and will you be going into any other genres?
Well, I got to just throw this out because we mentioned Kent Kruger. In between those two Edgar Awards, I had another book that was also nominated, and I lost out to Kent Kruger that year. Among other like amazing, I knew I wasn't going to win that year because
Yeah.
I never think I'm going to win. But anyway, that's just small world. Um, so okay, what was the question?
Well,
What am
basically,
I?
so what's next for you, and do you envision yourself branching out into any new genres?
So my last book, the book that came out last summer, was set in the 50s, small town Florida. Um, so I have written some set in the past.
Yeah.
When I wrote my first book, Bent Road was that first novel. I didn't think about it being crime fiction until it was nominated for a crime fiction award. My first, like the first real teacher that I had, I went to a writing conference and it was led by Dennis Lehane, who is of course a brilliant crime writer and working in TV. So a lot of my early teaching and people that I met were all crime writers. So the thing about crime is it gives you structure. You know, it's like what's going to happen. Somebody dies, somebody's missing, and now we got to find them. That's structure. It gives your book something to hang all your characters on. So I don't know that I'll really get away from crime, but that isn't what drives me as a writer, I guess. It's the internal struggles. It's the characters. It's a whole lot of other stuff that's just a jumble in my head. But the crime is a great hook to hang your hat on.
And my final question as we wrap up is, where can the audience, both live and recorded, where can people who are watching learn more about you? Are you on social media? Do you have a website? Where would you like people to look for you? And Matt, we'll start with you.
I have a website, mattgoldman.com. Uh, Facebook is probably where I'm most active on social media. I have a personal page and an author page. I'm also on Instagram. I think I'm on Threads, but I always forget to look at it. Uh, but that's where I can most frequently be found, those places.
Sure. And Lori?
I would pretty much ditto all that, except it's loriroy.com.
Yeah.
Facebook, Instagram, Threads. Again, I'm not there much, but I'm on it. And I'm a little bit, if you're a TikToker, I'm not real active on it, but I do have some stuff out there. So yeah, quick Google. I'm guessing you'll find either one of us pretty easily.
Yeah.
You're not hard to find. And yes, I feel like every author thinks they might be on Threads, but not really. So yes, you're in good company there. So folks, let's give Matt and Lori a big virtual round of applause for a wonderful conversation. Matt, Lori, we have 30 seconds. Any last words for the audience before we wrap up?
I would just say it's been a pleasure. This is a great event that you all have, and I'm thrilled that I got to be part of it.
I ditto that. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to engage with readers, whether it's in person or virtually, and I really appreciate everybody tuning in.
Great. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, audience. For those watching live, look for an email later tonight with the recording. And please take the feedback survey when you exit the Zoom. So thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night. Thanks again, Matt. Thanks again, Lori.
Good night.
Good night.